right. We are in a stretch of the Harmony of the Gospels where we could actually choose to study from Matthew, Mark, or Luke, because this is one of the this is one of the sections where the three pretty much are covering the exact same things. But we're going to study from Matthew. So if you want to be turning to the end of Matthew chapter 21, we're going to finish up a couple of thoughts there that we kind of ran out of time on last week, and then we're going to just continue right on in Matthew 22. So if you're here last week, you remember Jesus has taught a series of parables in the presence of the Pharisees where he's laying it all out on the line. There is no way that they cannot understand that he is saying, you guys think you're the chosen ones, but you're not. And not only are you not, the kingdom's going to be taken away from you, and it's going to be given to others. He's being very, very explicit about that. In fact, towards the end there of chapter 21, around verse 42, it says that Jesus said to them, "Did you never read in the scriptures?" And then he quotes from Psalm 118, "The stone which the builders rejected, this became the chief cornerstone. This came about from the Lord, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore, I say to you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people producing the fruit of it. And he who falls on this stone," your translation may say stumbles over this stone, "will be broken to pieces, but on whomever it falls, it will scatter him like dust." Okay? And notice verse 45. When the chief priests and the Pharisees heard his parables, they understood that he was speaking about them. When they sought to seize him, they feared the people because they considered him to be a prophet. Okay, so again, there's no ambiguity. You can imagine how the Pharisees would react to the things that Jesus has just taught and said, realizing that, hey, he's talking about them. They wanted to kill him, but they were afraid of the people. And we kind of closed last week because notice it says, "I say the kingdom of God will be taken away from you." Okay? So we talked about what happened just a few days later when Jesus died. What happened in the temple? Yeah. The veil or the curtain was ripped in two from top to bottom. Yes. And boy, howdy, how do you be more clear in saying to the Jewish nation, you were my people, you're not anymore. Okay. So, again, I want to emphasize so that there's no misunderstanding. It is fine if we want to support the modern day nation of Israel as our ally in the region. But if we say, oh, we have to support Israel because they're God's chosen people, no, they are not. They were. It was taken away from them. It was done so in a very emphatic manner. God has a chosen people today, doesn't he? Right? Those who do his will, those who obey him. He does not have a chosen nation. Okay? I am so thankful to be an American. I am so thankful for this privilege that has been given to me. I love my country. Tomorrow morning, if the Lord does not come, I will get up and I will go to my job, where I will be expected to offer up exceptional service in the national interest. I love my country. But America is not God's chosen people. Okay? Israel at one time was. America never has been. My soul is no more precious in God's sight because I am a citizen of the United States of America than is the soul of some young man trapped in Gaza just wanting to stay alive. God does not have a favored nation anymore. He has a chosen people, a royal priesthood, okay? But that's those of any nation who obey his will. Right? Any comments, anything on that before we transition into chapter 22?
Being torn. I mean, that was to show a lot of other things too about Jesus being our high priest,
Mm-hmm.
and taking his sacrifice in, and
Right. Yes. Yes.
once forever.
Right. The Levites are no longer the priests. Jesus is our priest there. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yes. All right. Okay, well, let's continue on in chapter 22. And again, if you, and I would encourage you, if you don't have a harmony of the Gospels, to get one. Visually, it's really, really interesting to see the lineup of where multiple Gospels, like in this case, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, cover the same thing. See who adds what details. Okay, we're going to talk about one of those things here in a little while, a little detail Mark adds that Matthew doesn't. And see, though, where there are instances where, only John covered this, or something like that. It really brings it to life visually, okay? So Jesus continues on. Keep in mind, he's probably in one of the temple courts at this time. He has just told the Pharisees, you're not the people anymore. And he continues to speak to them in parables. So verse 1, Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son. And he sent out his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding feast, and they were unwilling to come. Again, he sent out other slaves, saying, tell those who have been invited, behold, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fatted livestock are all butchered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding feast. But they paid no attention and went their way, one to his own farm, another to his business, and the rest seized his slaves and mistreated them and killed them. Okay, so let's pause here for a second. Okay? This is pretty obvious what is the parable is about here. It's yet again the Jewish people. They were invited to the feast, and they basically said, nope. Sorry, we're not interested here. We've got other more important things to do. They paid no attention, went their own way. The rest seized the king's slaves and mistreated them and killed them. That's a clear reference to what? Many of the prophets, okay, who were seized by the Jewish people and mistreated, even killed. Okay. So in verse 7, continues, the king was enraged, and he sent his armies, and destroyed those murderers and set their city on fire. Then he said to his slaves, the wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the main highways, and as many as you find there, invite to the wedding feast. Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered together all they found, both evil and good, and the wedding hall was filled with dinner guests. Okay, so we'll pause there again. In verse 7, notice it says, the king was enraged, sent his armies, destroyed those murderers, and set their city on fire. This could be a reference to the destruction of Jerusalem. We can't say definitively that it is, but it is quite possible that this is what Jesus was referring to when he says, destroyed those murderers, set their city on fire. But the key point is those who were originally invited just rejected the invitation. They RSVP'd no there. And so the king now says, okay, well, things are still prepared, so let's go out and let's invite others. So he tells his slaves, go into the main highways, and as many as you find there, invite to the wedding feast. This is a clear reference to the gospel going to the Gentiles, to us. Okay? So the slaves did as they were told. They went out into the streets and gathered together all they found. Okay? Now, you know me, I like to try to make application to us today. Are we going out into the main highways? Are we gathering together all we can? Or are we content to say, well, I already RSVP'd yes, so good enough? Okay. So it does say here, and there's some people misinterpret this, but in verse 10 it says, they gathered together all they found, both evil and good, and the wedding hall was filled with dinner guests. This does not mean that there will be evil people in heaven. Okay? What it does mean is we should go to everyone. We should invite everyone, no matter how good they are, no matter how evil they are. We have an obligation to proclaim the gospel to all. Because don't we have plenty of examples of people who were evil people who, when they heard the gospel, they were the ones most touched by it, and they did a complete 180, right? Okay. Think about the Apostle Paul for the obvious example there. A persecutor of the church, had men and women, Christians, thrown into prison, was on his way to continue that mission when he saw the light, okay, and did a complete 180. Jesus, how much time, we talked about this just last week even, I believe. He spent a lot of time with what two groups of people? Tax collectors, sinners. Sometimes it comes right out and says prostitutes. Okay? Because it was those people who were listening to him. The Pharisees weren't. The Pharisees weren't. It was the lowest of the low, the dregs of society, who, when they heard the good news, were willing to change. And so that's what verse 10 is saying, is that there were those who were some of the worst people of society there, but they heard the gospel, they changed, and so they were welcome into the kingdom of heaven. Right, yes. After he healed Legion, told him to stay there and teach. You know, to use a modern day example, if I say the name Jeffrey Dahmer, what does at least the majority of the world think of when you hear the name Jeffrey Dahmer? Yeah, mass murderer, cannibal, converted Christian. Converted Christian. He was converted before he himself was killed in prison. Okay? So as far as we know, Jeffrey Dahmer will be in heaven. Okay? That's what this passage is saying. No matter how evil, compel them, because some are going to listen. Some are going to listen. Okay? The wedding hall was filled with dinner guests. Now notice verse 11. But when the king came in to look over the dinner guests, he saw a man there who was not dressed in wedding clothes. And he said to him, "Friend, how did you come in here without wedding clothes?" And the man was speechless. Then the king said to the servants, "Bind him hand and foot and throw him into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen." So as I studied this passage, there's been a whole lot written about this. You know, did someone make it into heaven who shouldn't and then had to be thrown out? No, I don't think that's what's being taught here. The main point of this passage can be found at the end of verse 12. And the man was speechless. He didn't try to offer up any sort of defense because he knew that he had no defense. He knew that he had no excuse there. And so he was totally speechless. And I think about that in regards to myself, okay? Because as I've said on more than one occasion before, I've had all the privileges and advantages that one could have in terms of a Christian upbringing, a Christian education, okay, and all of that. If one day I hear some words that I don't want to hear, I too would be speechless because I've got no excuse. And that's the point here. This man had no excuse.
Was this man a sinner who had not repented? Is that what he represents?
Evidently so. Evidently so. And again, you can read lots of different things about, okay, so did somehow, you know, we have, or at least the world thinks of St. Peter at the pearly gates. Did St. Peter somehow make a mistake and let someone in that he shouldn't? And no, this is just saying that this man did not belong. He knew he didn't belong. That's why he offered up no defense. And because he did not belong, he was cast out.
I think it's just saying that you need to put on Christ. You need to have the right wedding clothes to get into heaven.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It is specifically mentioning the wedding clothes, and that certainly could be putting on Christ. Christ is the wedding clothes there. This man had not done that. Okay. Whatever the situation was, though, he was not prepared.
Well, I was reading it as this was the judgment day, and everyone is invited, but few are chosen. So there are going to be some that are rejected.
Yes, and that certainly could be a possibility. Again, there's a whole lot of thoughts on exactly what the wedding feast is there. So yes, could be the day of judgment. So, but again, the man was cast out. Notice what it says: bind him hand and foot, throw him into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen. Okay. So first of all, does that place where the man ended up sound like any place we want to be? Okay. Not particularly. I have also been privileged enough in my life to only think of once or twice when I was in so much pain that I was kind of, grinding the teeth there, okay? Those are not fond memories there. And so that is certainly not anything we want. Okay? Notice also, and this is a great passage to keep in mind, there are many people who believe that the majority of the world is going to be saved. It's really only the Hitlers and Stalins of the world who aren't going to be in heaven there. But most people are going to be saved there. But notice verse 14. For many are called, but how many are chosen? Few. Few are chosen. Okay? When you couple that with Jesus' teaching on broad is the way that leads where? Destruction. And many who find it, narrow is the way that leads to life, and few there be that find it. I don't know what percentage of the world's population is going to be in heaven, okay? Other than I know the number is not greater than 49.99%. Because otherwise these passages would make no sense. Okay? That would contradict them. But let's also look at the fact that it says many are called. Many are called. How many are called? Hopefully everyone, but that kind of depends on who. Yeah. However many are called depends in large part on me and on you. And given the stakes here, we need to make sure that many is as large a number as possible. There. Any other thoughts there? Uh-huh. So the wedding hall was filled with dinner guests, and could that be a reference to the church? Yes, it could. It could. That is one of the things that I read as a theory on explaining this passage. It's one of those things that there are a number of interpretations that could make sense there. That is certainly one of them. I just would hesitate to say this is what it means. I'm not that smart. So, yeah. Okay, so continuing on with verse 15. Then the Pharisees went and plotted together how they might trap him in what he said, and they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are truthful and teach the way of God in truth, and defer to no one, for you are not partial to any. Tell us then, what do you think? Is it lawful to give a poll tax to Caesar or not? Okay. So first of all, again, keep in mind the context. Jesus has just put the Pharisees to shame, okay? So they know that if they turn right around, and who knows? You know, we obviously don't know. They may have been standing 20 yards away for the last few minutes and then say, okay, we've come up with the way we can trap him. By the way, the word that's translated trap there is, in some translations, it's ensnare. It is the idea of how they would use nets and throw them over birds and catch them, kill them, eat them. It is that connotation there, the word trap. So, but notice what they do. They've just, possibly minutes before, been thoroughly rebuked by Jesus. So if they go right back up to him themselves, they know that they're not going to be able to trick him. Okay? So they send some of their disciples, some people who they think he hasn't seen before, to pose this question that they think is going to trap him, okay? So they start with one of the most common tricks in the book. You flatter someone, okay? There, all right? Oh, you know, John, you are just the greatest song leader that there is in this whole state. Sharp-dressed man here this morning, yeah, all of that kind of stuff there, okay? You are a really good song leader. But they start with the flattery angle. Now, notice what they say. Whether they believed the things they say, kind of doubtful that they actually believed what they said, but ironically enough, the things that they said about Jesus were true. Okay? Teacher, we know that you are truthful and teach the way of God in truth and defer to no one, for you are not partial to any. All of those things were true. Their sincerity in saying them is probably not there, but they were actually true. Okay? Can the same be said for us? Are we truthful? Do we teach the way of God in truth? Okay. Do we defer to no one? Okay. Now, this does not mean being confrontational and provoking problems. What I think of when I read this about deferring to no one, I think about a man named John the Baptist, who there was kind of a powerful person politically. Did John the Baptist defer to that powerful politician? He called him out for his sin. He called him out. And it kind of cost him, didn't it? Yeah, it literally cost him his head. Okay? Not partial to any. Okay? Again, are we that way? Are we that way? So, again, they thought they had Jesus trapped. Is it lawful to pay the poll tax or not? They thought they had him trapped because they thought if he said, no, you don't have to pay this poll tax, Well, then they already had the Herodians with him. The Herodians were a political group, not a religious group in any way, shape, or form. If he had said no, they were going to go straight to the Romans and say, hey, see that guy over there? He's saying we don't have to pay your taxes. Okay? But if he said yes, well, how did the people feel about paying taxes to the Romans? Something they looked forward to? Okay. Yeah, it was their April 15th there, you know. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. The ordinary people hated the Romans. Why was Matthew hated? Because he was a tax collector there. So they thought they had Jesus yet again. No matter what he says, if he says, no, don't pay the tax, we'll go to the Romans. If he says yes, well, his popularity with the people's gone because they all hate paying taxes. Okay? Verse 18, but he perceived their malice and said, why are you testing me, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the poll tax. And they brought him a denarius. And he said to them, whose likeness and inscription is this? They said to him, Caesar's. Then he said to them, then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And hearing this, they were amazed, and leaving him, they went away. Okay, so he perceived that they were trying to trap him. He perceived their malice, and he just comes right out and says, why are you testing me, you hypocrites? Okay? He asked for the coin. Now, as I studied this, there's a little detail here that I had never really thought about before. Okay? I mean, again, I've been raised in the church all my life. Until this week, I never thought about this little detail. Notice what he says to them. Whose likeness and inscription is this? Okay? And their response is, he asked them two questions. They gave him one answer. Because it is believed that the denarius at that time, it did have Caesar's likeness on it, but it is believed that it also had the inscription, Caesar Augustus, Judea being subdued. So he asked them, whose likeness, and tell me the inscription. And they so loathed the Romans that they only answered the likeness question. They did not answer the inscription question there. Just a little side thing that I found interesting there. Okay? So he says to them, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Now, I have a recollection of a couple of years ago almost now, someone teaching this very class for the first time actually. It was on the call of Matthew, and this person had the either courage or stupidity to get up and teach about the fact, using this as one of the passages, we have an obligation to this day to pay our taxes. And we do. Okay? We have an obligation to render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. We render to our government the taxes that they levy on us. And we're not going to go through all the why we do that and all of that kind of stuff. But it is clear from this passage and others that we do. But notice he says, so give Caesar the things that are Caesar's, but give God the things that are God's. Okay? We have an obligation to obey the government as long as it does not conflict with what God says. If that conflict arises, that does not mean that we have the obligation to take up arms against our government. It means we have the obligation to do what God said. Okay? Did Daniel go try to kill Nebuchadnezzar when he issued the edict, don't pray? What did he do? He went and prayed. Okay? If, and again, we are so privileged. This is one of the reasons why I'm so thankful to be an American. We can come here in freedom and we can worship in freedom. Even this day, there are people who aren't so fortunate. And if it ever becomes us, then we have the obligation to do what we are commanded to do by God, irregardless of the cost to our property, our lives, whatever it may be. All right. I think we can go ahead and cover the next one here because, again, it's pretty straightforward here. That on that same day, some Sadducees who say there is no resurrection came to Jesus and questioned him and said, there were 7 brothers. The first married and died, and having no children, left his wife to his brother. So also the second and the third down to the 7th. Last of all, the woman died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife of the 7 will she be? For they all had married her. But Jesus answered and said, you are mistaken, not understanding the Scriptures, nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. Okay, so the Sadducees come, and again, I was taught as a young person, it is fair, you see, that the Pharisees did believe in the resurrection, and it is sad, you see, that the Sadducees didn't even believe in the resurrection. We know from Acts 23, Paul is before the council, 23:7. He said this, there occurred a dissension between the Pharisees and Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, nor an angel, nor a spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledged them all. Okay? All right. So the Sadducees, who don't even believe the resurrection, come up with this contrived example here, but it's based on the law of Moses. Okay? They're referring to Deuteronomy 25:5, where it does say that if the oldest son has married, dies childless, the younger brother should then take the woman as wife and raise up children in his brother's name there. So they come up with this example where this thing happens 7 times, okay? So the woman she's no adulteress. She is legally married, morally married to 7 different men. So in the resurrection, whose wife is she going to be? Because all 7 were her husband. Okay? So in his answer, Jesus points out that the Sadducees make not one mistake in their question, but they actually make 3 mistakes. And what I want us to think about as we close out here is, are we still making some of these 3 mistakes ourselves? First mistake, they failed to understand the Scriptures. A little bit of a problem with that in the world today, isn't there? Okay. with a misunderstanding of the Scriptures. Jesus said, you misunderstand the Scriptures. They also did not understand the power of God. They did not understand the things that God is capable of doing. And the third mistake they made was they assumed that the future, heaven in this case, would be just like the present. And Jesus says, no, 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 no. It's not going to be like that at all. In heaven, they're neither married nor given in marriage, but are like who? The angels. We are no longer physical beings, okay? We are no longer the way we are. You know, I've got a brother and 3 sisters, earthly brother and 3 sisters. In heaven, I'll have a whole bunch of brothers and sisters, okay? And those 4 individuals that I was just referring to will be no more special to me than anyone else. We will be like the angels in heaven. And we are a minute or 2 over time, so with that,